Hey everybody, we are live here with Dr. Patrick Porter from New Bern, North Carolina.
Yes, hello, it's good to be here.
Dr. Patrick Porter is the brains behind BrainTap and many other amazing things. You've written 9 books, is that correct?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
He's written 9 books, and we just wanted to have him on here today on BrainTap because he's just a wealth of knowledge, and the things that he's done with BrainTap, we've used with our patients very successfully. So I was going to have him kind of discuss some of the history behind BrainTap, a little bit of the science behind BrainTap, and then we'll just get crazy from there. Okay. So thanks for being here, Dr. Porter.
All right. Well, let's start with the history. So back in the 80s, actually, I was involved with a company called Light and Sound Research. After my dad, he was training people in a mind program called the Silva method. And we used a sound called the Silva sound. And I think it would be classed as a isochronic tone generator because it was used in a room with a cassette. And it would, your brain, every brain in the room actually would synchronize to alpha when they're doing it. And we would use GSR machines to measure. It would be making a beeping sound until you hit 10 hertz frequency, and then it would stop. You know, so we could use that. And that was a trainer that I started with. And then from there, when I got involved with a company in Scottsdale called Light and Sound Research, we included light with it. So we can talk a lot about what's going on, why light, why sound, why the best thing is to use them together for neurological function. And over the years, in '89, for those that aren't aware of it, we were given the best new gadget of the year for a machine before there was CDs, before there was really cell phone use like there is today. Our big thing was nobody could understand what it was doing. There wasn't, you know, now there's a lot of knowledge. I think with Obama saying that the 2000s was the basically age of the brain, you know, people are waking up to the brain. Now you go to the grocery store and every other cover has a brain on it, and we're talking about it, and everybody understands the benefits. 15 years ago or 20 years ago, to be safe, I guess, people thought the brain was fixed. You know, that we didn't have, our brain wasn't plastic or had plastic qualities, which meant it would change. So over the years, when we first started, there was no neurofeedback. They had a device called, it was a lifetime LED panel, which showed really blood flow in the right hemisphere or the left hemisphere. And then what happened was we started getting into neurological activity and being able to record it, which made things really interesting. So we could see what we were doing and create an algorithm. So that's kind of the history of it. Over the years, I was fortunate enough to be one of 6 people. We took a device that was the size of a microwave, and we made it into the size of what would now be like an oversized cell phone or something. And at the time we did it, the machines were costing $10,000, and we brought the cost down to about $400, which our BrainTap still to this day is not that much more expensive than it was in the 80s. We just sold a lot more so we can keep the price where it is.
That's amazing. And now with the convenience of the smartphones, being able to put it into an app and everything like that, that's been huge for accessibility, because we've had a lot of patients be able to just purchase a headset and just use the app sometimes. Yeah. So for people that aren't familiar with the BrainTap itself, can you kind of talk a little bit about what it looks like, how it's used, and what types of conditions people are suffering from that can use it, or just how to use it?
Okay, no problem. People can go to #BrainTap on the internet and find thousands of pictures of it, but I'm going to explain it here.
Most of people are laying in a recliner with the headset on.
Right. So most people enjoy listening to it, and I'll show you. I have a picture of one here, just so people can see it. I'm in my home office, so I don't. My equipment's downstairs in my recliner, so it's not up here where I'm at. But what you're seeing here when you're looking at this is there's a visor and there's earphones. So I'll talk a little bit about what each of those are. Let's start with the simple part. First of all, we do have relaxing music. They call it 10 cycle music, if you will. A lot like what they call Baroque music, which synchronizes the brain and creates an alpha kind of activity. And what we've done is we've offset our music just a little bit between the right and left hemispheres so that we're always challenging the brain to do something. And sound is one way we can do that. So then we incorporate voice in some of the processes. We have 1,200 different ones on the app. So some of them are voice, some aren't. Some are my voice, some are other voices. We have men and women doing it because people want to do that. Now that depends on what you want to change or use it for. So what we know about genetics is, we didn't know this when we started it, but now through science, they've done pre and post genetic testing after doing BrainTap and things of that nature. And what happens is you can change up to 2,300 gene expressions just by thinking differently about the situation. You can change it by the food you eat, by the exercise you take part in. So now not only is our brain plastic, but our whole nervous system, which makes up and comprises really every cell of the body. So, you know, every cell has to communicate with the brain, with the heart, and with the gut. So all these different mechanisms. So what we did with the BrainTap through the ears, we can deliver that, like you said, some clients or patients can just buy the app and start listening to it with their own earphones. And we're getting pretty good results. One of our studies that's coming back from India, I just found out earlier today, that they're now just summarizing the reports. But we did it where people just did the earphones, people did the BrainTap. So we're actually going to have some quantitative data here in July that will tell us, you know, how much more effective the light is. So I'm going to talk a little bit about why we have light. Mostly when you close your eyes, the brain does something, or our nervous system does something, where the executive functioning shuts down. To give you an example, if we were sitting in a movie and it got scary, the first thing we would do is probably close our eyes and tell ourselves, it's not real, it's not real. And then that disassociation would cause the executive function to say, hey, it's not there, because our brain literally, because it's all inputted information or input, it might think the movie is real. We start feeling, at least by association, we have something in our brain called mirror neurons. So when we're going through that experience, our brain either becomes the victim or the one, you know, doing the killing, you know. So either way, I don't know if that's good, but people watch those, right? But to shut it down, the brain shuts down the executive functioning. Now that happens every time you close your eyes, because that's a conditioned response. We've been doing it since we were babies.
Your brain thinks it's sleep time.
Yes, yeah, the brain says, okay, it's time for delta, let's shut off executive functioning. And that's not really what you want for stress reduction and for problem solving. We like to say we're performance-based mindfulness. So it's not like we don't want people to be mindless. You know, we want people to have a mind and make a change. So we found that when you introduce light into the equation, it keeps the executive functioning going. And just recently, within the last 3 years, because we're working a lot more with ophthalmologists that are optometrists, I should say, that are working with traumatic brain injuries. And they're saying that 30% of your hearing comes in through your eyes. And you can kind of just do a self-test. You've probably been to a seminar and you couldn't really hear the lecturer, but then you adjusted your vision so you could see the person face to face, and the brain does it. And that's because the way our brain, our primitive reflexes, if you will, as we go through, let's say we're going through the jungle, we don't hear every sound. We hear the sounds that we're looking at. So it's almost like radar. So our eyes and the way our eyes move, that's why it's so important for you neurologically based doctors to see how eye movement works, is because it's activating different regions of the brain, and if they don't have it. So what we found is when we introduce light too, we're activating more of the brain's potential. They say that the visual cortex actually involves every region of the brain, or the eyes, if you want to think about it that way. So what happens is that we can keep that engaged. By keeping that engaged, we've now raised the game. We've taken them to a new level. Instead of shutting down the brain during these mindfulness practices, we're increasing the brain's ability to bring energy. Now, the reason light also works is light does something in the body, and we're not going to right now, I guess, get into much detail about it, but what happens is light is absorbed into the body, and every cell of your body wants light. If it gets light, then it creates something called ATP. ATP is, just think of it like currency for the body. If we don't have currency, we can't transact health. We can't rebuild, we can't rejuvenate. So a lot of times people might relax, they might even be doing all the right things, but if they're stressed out and they're eating poorly, and they're not sleeping, there's no energy to heal. So that's why it's so important to get people into theta. So the other way that we do it to get more light into the body and into the brain, we discovered about 4 years ago that we could create, and we're the only ones that do this, and we have a patent pending on it, is the way that we do our lights in the ears. Now,
it's always a question from the patients.
Yeah. So what's happening there is we use two different wavelengths of light, right? We use the 470 nanometer light, and we use 633 nanometer light. Those are in the spectrum of light that happens every morning when we get up. They're the healing light. Now, we could also introduce like 810 or something like that, but we didn't, just to be a little safer in what we do, because that's an infrared light. It's still safe and can heal people, but we didn't include it in our, you don't want to include it in your eyes mechanism anyway, but it could be in the ears. But we have those too, because all the blood in your body circulates through your ears every 3 to 5 minutes. So if you're going to blood dope with light, which is what we want to do, we want to get light throughout the body. We're going to, the photic effect is that the blood's rushing through the ears. And if anybody's ever cut their ear, you know how hard it is to get it to stop, because there's just a lot of pressure there. The blood's just pumping through there. So as the blood passes through there, and the lights are, and these lights are actually tuned with frequencies. Everything is frequency or energy. So as you think about the energy, we're providing energy to the body through light and frequency, a Nogier frequency that actually instructs the nervous system, hey, shut down the sympathetic overload, turn on parasympathetics. That's what's happening. So if you just turned on our headset and put that on, you would have a physical effect. Something would happen. That's the difference between using just the earphones and using the whole headset. And then as it circulates through the body, what's happening is that blood that is now the hemoglobin is absorbing the photons, circulating through the body the same way it would with a laser or with any other low-level light therapy device. And these are healing frequencies of light. So they're being circulated through the body. When the cell is introduced to another cell that's going through apoptosis or cell death, the photon gives it away, gives the photon to that cell. At that moment, the mitochondria kicks back up. So think about it like every cell's a Lamborghini and it doesn't have any gas. And these photons' job is to move through the body, finding the Lamborghinis that aren't running because they have no gas in the tank. So once it has gas in the tank, the body knows what to do. You know, so when we're doing that, and just kind of bring it into chiropractic lingo, in all the chiropractic training manuals, whether it be Palmer or Parker, all of these different schools, in their textbook, there's a place that says that the chiropractor brings light to the area that's in distress. So because the nervous system is light, you know, when that's what transacting it. So we're gonna give the body what it needs most. Now, most of the time, when you think about a laser treatment, most laser treatments can be a minute, can be 2 minutes or 3 minutes. We found that in order to get the same light dosage, which there's a way to work that out mathematically, how much light over a square centimeter or whatever, we had to have the person exposed to our light for 20 minutes. So that's why most of our sessions are 20 minutes.
Cool.
So you can do more than that, but what happens when you get too much light in an area, just like it would with a laser, it reflects that light back. Mm-hmm. It's like a sponge that's filled with water. You can't just keep putting water to that sponge. It's got to go somewhere, drain the sponge, bring it back and get more. So that's really why we have the 20-minute sessions. Now, when all of this is going on, each time the brain is going through these different brain waves. So we can get into that a little bit more if you want afterwards too, but each one of these brain waves has a special quality to it. And if any of these brain waves are out of balance or they're not synchronized. Now, balance doesn't mean you got 25% of the 4 lower brain frequencies. There's, to give you an idea, when you're awake, we should have about 40% beta activity, maybe 30% alpha, you know, then you're looking at maybe 10% theta, and then the rest would be gamma and delta. You know, but unfortunately, what we see when we're doing our brain scans, whether it be through brain mapping through an EEG device or using our HRV software, which does also give us percentages of brain waves, we find that most of our clients, and even the doctors this weekend that we were just at, we found most of their brains were in delta. Now, it could have been because at seminars, we can't really judge it because they're out of their natural environment. They're not doing their work. Most of the doctors are used to walking around all day. Now they're stuck in a classroom, you know, for 8 to 10 hours. But when the brain has inflammation or has brain trauma, it will overproduce delta is what we find. So, and if somebody doesn't have enough theta, they're going to have problems sleeping. If somebody doesn't have enough alpha, they're not going to feel very good. They're going to have maybe the symptoms of things like depression, anxiety, fear, or they could have overproduced it too, and depending upon their psychological state, which is a whole different story.
So I guess it would be good to talk a little bit about each of the like alpha, theta, beta, delta, and gamma, just a little bit, because I know I've listened to you speak a couple of times, and one thing you kind of always speak about is our sympathetic dominance, that we're always kind of in that sympathetic tone. Can you talk a little bit about that, where that falls into our different types of brain waves, and how we can control it, and why BrainTap's so successful with that?
Okay, we'll do it. Okay, so first of all, most people are running around with high delta and high beta. Okay, those are two very different states. So it's almost like a Jekyll and Hyde, that's why. And so what's happening is the body is in need of getting rid of the inflammation, what's going on there. But then they're in this fight or flight mode, this almost this vigilance mode, like special forces, if you will. And they're always on attack. Now, if you're always on in that vigilant mode, which is a high beta state, then you've lost the ability to digest properly. So that means your gut-brain axis is all messed up. You could be taking the world's greatest nutrition, and if there's no blood flow, no circulation, no ability to digest it, then you're going to prove your medical doctor right that all you're doing is eliminating them because the body isn't able to metabolize them. So we have to absorb them. So what we find is you can break that state, but what happens is people get into this sympathetic dominance, which we basically have called this neurological syndrome that we have, where people go to sleep stressed, wake up stressed, they're stressed all day long. They wouldn't know what to do if it wasn't stressed. And this is kind of, in a bigger way, happens to our vets, but they have a really good reason for it. If you get up every morning and you don't know if you're going to see your buddy or if you're going to be around tomorrow, you're going to start being pretty vigilant. The problem is they were never trained what to do when they get home. The same mental state you have on the battlefield is not the mental state you have when you're with your family on a picnic. But because the brain gets stuck, your brain, all of our brains, like simplicity and like patterns. So it's always trying to create the pattern and do it the simplest way possible. And even though we have to change and adapt every day, the brain tries to keep everything regulated, tries to keep everything the same. We don't have to relearn all of our kids' names and all of, our addresses and how to get to work. So all of that is organized in such a way. And then you introduce stress into the equation, a stressful event. We would call that a stress fracture. So, but of the brain, of the thoughts. So when you think about the three reasons people have disorders, thoughts, traumas, and toxins. So when you think about the thought equation, your thoughts actually control the way your body does everything. So if you don't change the thoughts, you can change all the external pieces, but the thoughts run unconsciously. They run without any effort. So we have to somehow break that pattern. That's where BrainTap comes in. And when we break the pattern, we do that through light, sound, and vibration, because we're taking them out of their environment. So where we're talking right now, we're using our eyes, we're listening with our ears. We don't have a kinesthetic piece. This isn't virtual reality. But if you're immersed in an experience where you're in a zero gravity chair, like you said, you see them on the internet, they're in the zero gravity chairs. Now you've taken the weight off the body. You're exposing their brain with so much light. There's no way they can really think of anything else. They have the sound going. Now the brain can only do 7 plus or minus 2 things. We've just occupied at least 6 of them. So now, and it's all choreographed. And the brain loves patterns. So it starts going, oh, wow, wow, wow. So as long as we change that up, the way the BrainTap works best is each time they do a session, whether it be once a week every week, or changing it up every day, as long as you change it up, the brain's going to learn to adapt. It's not about is beta better than theta or alpha, and I'm going to get into those as well. It's about, can you go to alpha when you want to have an intuition? When you have a hunch, can you follow that through? And while you're there, by the way, the brain is going to make more acetylcholine. Perfect. Because that's the brainwave state that tells the gut, hey, it's time to make it. And 90% of those neurotransmitters are made in your gut. So, and your brain loves your own neurotransmitters. I mean, you can take supplement, but that's only going to be a supplement. You can't take as much as you can dump. I mean, you have one good feeling and you've now dumped $35,000 worth of neurochemicals into your system. We just can't afford it unless you're Bill Gates or something, you know, then you can afford to go buy all these neurotransmitters. But and whatever somebody gives you externally, which some people need just to get them to where their brain can produce it themselves, it's going to be short-lived because the half-life isn't that good in the body. It's just going to move through it. So if they're not able to sleep deep and then wake up and go through these cycles, you don't get the GABA effect. The GABA effect happens in theta. And that's why right now in the medical world, there's a really big push to create GABAnoids because they're all talking about because of the sleep problem and what's going on. We can't synthesize it. Our body doesn't like synthetics, you know, even though some people will get a reaction to it and it'll be positive. They also know a good number of people will get a reaction to it that's negative. Just watch any sporting event, you get bombarded with these these commercials that tell you, hey, you take this and you'll never be able to have children again, you know, or whatever, you know, all these things are going to happen to you. So
not comforting.
yeah. So, but your body loves your own neurochemicals. You would never form unless you have another kind of disorder, which I have seen people that have been their immune system turns on them, you know, the autoimmune diseases. But we can, you know, that's a neurological fix too. So somebody can fix that. So all of these different brain waves mean something. So what BrainTap does is once it takes you through, like with training wheels, if you will, through these different states, what we find is when you cross over the 10 hertz barrier, the 7.8 hertz barrier, these are both brainwave states. One is alpha, one is theta. We find that there's a burst of gamma activity. So gamma, they used to think was just anxiety and stress and worry. But now because we can record it and we can document what's happening when somebody's in high states of gamma, one of the best research projects ever done on meditation was done by the University of Wisconsin. And they took Buddhist monks who were able to sit out in the snow and basically take wet towels and steam dry them from their own energy, you know, and they were not asleep, they were in gamma. Now, most of our brains, of course, we're not trained to do that. So we don't sit around in the snowbank and melt snow around us like they do. But they wanted to find out, hey, what's going on with their brain? Most people thought they were going to sleep because they appear to be asleep, but they were in this hyper state. So now we know, like creative geniuses, people who are really artistic, they have high gamma going. People who are healers, we've seen that they have these spikes in gamma while they're healing. And almost like an out-of-body kind of experience, they get these expanded states of awareness. So
is this like the flow state? Is this what?
Yeah, it's a higher. You can get into flow state when you're in theta, but this seems to be like the flip side of it. Like there's another side of it. Like when basketball players, they did this study with people who were wearing wearable EEG, and while they're not thinking about it. Like now that we're going into the basketball finals, you know, people are watching the games. Those guys aren't thinking about all that. If they were thinking about it, they would be tripping over their feet and falling all over. But they do high level physics while they're playing basketball, and they don't even realize it, you know, because they've just done it so much, it becomes unconscious. Right. You know, when you think about you're moving at whatever 11 miles an hour and you're going to stop, look at the basket for a second, adjust the torque of the ball off your fingers, and it's going to go into the rim. You know, they're doing all of that unconsciously, but it's really, to get a robot to do that, you know, they're still having trouble with that. But our body does it. We do a lot of things in this flow state. And if you think about your brain in the electrical system, which is the brain we're talking about, it's also being managed by the heart. So your heart is a magnetic system, which they know that your heart can magnetize energy around you up to 18 feet, which means they can measure. In fact, when we were with Dr. Oz just about a month and a half ago, there's a group there that we're talking with that does baby monitors. They can measure a baby's heart rate in rhythms like HRV at a distance of over 18 feet. Because it's all that technology is out there now, because that baby's sitting there resonating out this frequency every beat of the heart. So if you think about if your heart's in harmony, then it's setting up this frequency. It's kind of like Wi-Fi, but healthy, you know, so you have it, it's creating up your own field, but then you have this electrical field that is tighter. The electrical field isn't that's why they're having so much trouble with dry leads technology, because the electrical field doesn't broadcast. It's kind of inside our head, so we've got to use these most of the time gooey stuff or that. But the heart has 40,000 or more different neuron connections. It's a little brain inside the heart that talks to the brain. So you have this heart brain, and then we can measure that through HRV, right, to see if there's this relationship. And they also know that we have this gut brain, and it has gray matter. In fact, the gut has more neuron connections than both of those combined. So we have these three brains working together, and if they're all in harmony, these frequencies all have something to do with it, because they're all sending information. If you don't have delta frequencies going, which most people don't have that problem, but some people do, then your body is not going to rejuvenate. We need that deep state of delta to really rejuvenate the body and get that deep level sleep that typically, now most people know this, but in 2016, when Scientific American came out with their article about the plumbing system of the brain, they showed that the brain only detoxes while in deep level 4 sleep. But unfortunately, most people never measure that, or they think you sleep in time, which is true. I mean, some people need 6 hours, some people need 8, but what we really need is anywhere between an hour to 2 hours of deep sleep, this level 4 sleep. Once you have this deep sleep, you have these gamma bursts, and that's where the energy comes from. And they know that when you're doing that, you're detoxing. So if anyone's watching here on Brain Chat, if they've ever woke up in the middle of the night and they had sleep paralysis, they woke up in the middle of one of these cleaning cycles. So think about it like the brain says, okay, we're going to dump some toxins. You get locked out of your nervous system. You're paralyzed. It dumps it. It only takes a second, maybe less than a second. Boom. It pushes out the toxins. Then it starts up again. If you don't do that, you get leaky brain, just like you get leaky gut. Those toxins have to go somewhere. And that shows up with, dizziness, shows up as foggy brain, shows up as headaches. But if you're not detoxing the brain too, there's no room for healing to happen. So we've got to push nutrients in the form of light, and we've got a detox, which comes in the form of sleep. So if we can do both those things, the brain can self-regulate, and come back online. It just needs the right nutrients and the right environment, and the body can heal itself. That's what innate intelligence will do. So that's part of the equation here.
Awesome. Yeah, I love this stuff, man. You're speaking my language. I work in the world of neuro rehab, and we always speak of plasticity. And you mentioned the brain likes patterns. Sometimes we forget too that positive plasticity is good, but there's also things such as negative plasticity, which it seems like you're able to break those negative plastic cycles. It's interesting to me too, like I was reading just a little bit about frontal lobe activation. The frontal lobe is so sensitive to our stress hormones. So what would you recommend for people who have lots of stress? How can this play a role in that?
Well, first of all, doing BrainTap, but also working on breathing. There's 3 things that we always find when we test people's nervous system. The 3 groups of people that are the best are dancers. So think about ballroom dancers. You have to move and breathe. If you don't breathe, you look like a klutz. I mean, your body, your muscles won't do it. And if you have to think to, so it's like getting into that flow state. Those are really good. People who do Tai Chi, because again, it's movement and flow. Our body wants movement, and it needs oxygen and movement and all these things. So in the brain, they know that exercise for the brain is really important. And then we have yoga as one of them. So those 3 groups always test the best. So we always say, you want to do like a BrainTap program. If it's not BrainTap, something like that, where you're teaching the nervous system to get offline, reboot, rejuvenate, but then you've got to also work it. So we have an adaptive nervous system. So, but if we don't ever ask it to adapt, just like I was saying earlier, the body inherently doesn't want to do much.
Right.
That's why it's not just a physics law. A body at rest tends to stay at rest. It's actually most people, if they get the choice, but also a body in movement will stay in movement. So that's the neuroplasticity you're talking about. One neuroplastic study that we just did a case study with one of our doctors, and he has a device called the New Mind. And what's really cool about the new mind is it actually measures plasticity, which means how much neural connectivity do we have in the brain.
Oh, wow.
So it can test, hey, how much do you have now? How much do you have afterwards? And he took women 60 to 75 years old and did a 3-week study. And then he expanded it out into 6 weeks. And he found that after 6 weeks, he was getting over 60% neuroplasticity in those brains. So somebody's thinking, oh, I'm too old for that. No, your brain literally, your brain is like your liver. You know, if your liver can regenerate, your brain can too regenerate. It's more important than the liver. So those are two very important organs, right? And so, but you have to give them the right information, the right, in the form of nutrients, in the form of, physical exercise and things of that nature.
Amazing. Yeah, this stuff is it's so interesting. I don't want to keep you for too much longer. I know you had a busy day just getting back in town. We have just a couple of questions. Someone did ask about, like, you kind of mentioned it, the difference between just using headphones versus the lights. I know from personal experience, I did way better, and I had a better experience when I had the headset on as opposed to just the earbuds. But for people getting started, could they just give it a shot?
Right. I mean, you should share with them your link, like at the office. You can give them a link and they can do the 30 days free or 15 days free.
Oh, for sure.
And the nice thing is that that's a nice way to see how you're going to respond to it, because you should get some kind of fact, like you feel rested, recharged, rebooted. Now, then, of course, if you like it, the headset's not very expensive. They can get them right at your office for only $547. So they can, I mean, it's not like it's that expensive. We also have a program that I'm not sure if you're aware of, but we do it with the doctors where they can pay $200 down and $50 a month. So we make it affordable for people, and we do it through the offices. So there's ways they can do this. Some people just do it in the office with the doctor 2 or 3 times a week, and then they just use the earbuds at home. You know, and as long as you're doing something every 72 hours to improve your nervous system's function, you're going to see an improvement.
Yeah, I think that's the beauty of BrainTap, is it's something that you could just be doing at home, which is, like, the accessibility is huge. Because when we do therapies in the office, I always tell people the language of the brain is repetition. To create new patterns, it's got to be a repetitive thing, like you said. So having that accessibility is huge. So that's awesome that you guys offer that. And then any other thing you want to touch on before I let you sneak away with the grandkids?
I think the main thing is just know that we have a neurological problem in the world because of technology, like whether it be 3G, 5G, EMF, or just our lifestyles looking at screens all day, or the way that we're in a busy world. That's why I have the Thrive and Overdrive book. So you owe it to yourself to take some time, whether it be 10 minutes, 20 minutes, even 5 minutes a day, to start really getting your nervous system to reboot, and see how much more you can accomplish when you look at something with fresh eyes and you start, just the body can't just go and go and go and then pass out or use stimulants. A lot of people are using, coffee and other stimulants to keep their body going, and that's a short-term solution with long-term problems. So you want to have really good solutions. So I think know that the solutions are out there. You're here on Brain Chat to learn about them. I've listened to some of the other chats, and there's a lot of good information. Be willing to learn, grow, and then use it. Test it within your own life and see if it works for you.
Oh, I love it. Thank you. You are your brain, people, so be very nice to it. And
yes.
Dr. Porter's research has allowed a lot of us to benefit from that. So thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you.